Hadith. This religion is defective. I want to return it. A Bedouin came to the Prophet and gave a pledge of allegiance for embracing Islam. The next day he came with fever and said to the Prophet, "Please cancel my pledge of embracing Islam and of emigrating to Medina." The Prophet refused, and 3 times he said, "Medina is like a furnace. It expels out the impurities and selects the good ones and makes them perfect." So, a Bedouin walks into Muhammad's tent and embraces Islam. He embraces a lifetime commitment. And then, the very next day, this same guy comes down with a fever. And then basically wants to return his religion. He basically goes back to the store, Islam in his grocery bag, and says, "This religion is defective. I want to return it." And this scene, it's just so ridiculous. Honestly, it's hysterical. If I had been in the tent at that moment, I would have burst out laughing. The wild misunderstanding of religion here. And this is a glimpse of the raw material Muhammad was working with at the time. But this misunderstanding is just so over the top and an almost childish understanding of what religion is. And this was the pagan mentality, seeking comfort and pleasure through pleasing the gods. And in this case, it seems, Allah was just not working out. So, what do you do with something that's not working out? Well, you return it. And when I first read this, once you get over the silliness of the whole thing, my mind actually went to Job. Now, just contrast these two people. Job as sort of the straight man in a comic duo, and then this Bedouin guy as the comically inept religious seeker. You have Job, who endured the worst of the worst and came through on the other side, faithful as ever. And then you have this guy, who got a fever and renounced his faith. It's so pathetic. And sadly, it's also very modern. The outlook of this Bedouin, just a part of the attitude on display, actually does have a link to our time. This is an example of what Christian Smith famously dubbed the religion of our time, meaning our time, the present day. He called it moralistic therapeutic deism. The idea that God, whatever that might be, well, God wants me to be good, whatever that might be, and is basically here to make me feel good. And this is, obviously, especially if you're listening to this, you probably know, a pathetic excuse for religion. But I would argue what the Bedouin is expecting is even more pathetic than this stuff that we see today. This guy didn't even include the moralistic part in any of this. This is just therapeutic deism with probably a polytheistic twist. So this guy believes that God, or probably in his mind, the gods, exist to make him feel good, to make his life easy and comfortable. So he embraces Islam. That is, until he gets a fever. And he renounces Islam because of a fever. Now, if this happened, this was likely a random occurrence. But even if it wasn't, there would still be 2 ways to interpret that. If you put yourself in the mind of the man, he could say, 1, wow, this fever, this wasn't a coincidence. All right. And so if you're at that point where you say, this isn't a coincidence, it has to mean one of two things. Number one, the old gods don't want me to do this. Or number two, maybe this is a test from Allah of my sincerity. And it seems this man clearly did not contemplate number two. And Muhammad hints at that, with his metaphor of Medina as a purifying furnace. Now, I don't know how serious Muhammad was being here or how literal he was about Medina making people perfect. I mean, Medina has certainly produced some far from perfect people over the years. But the message is that you should not expect ease and comfort just because you embrace Islam. That comes later, like way later, when you're dead. But in the present world, even in Medina, you are not in heaven or even Eden. You are on earth, as imperfect as it is. And in this story, you also see the seriousness with which Islam would come to treat apostates. Now, apostasy, leaving the faith, it's just something that is not allowed to happen. And this is part of that one-way ratchet we go over in the history episodes. And it's a key part of how this religion eventually took over every country that it conquered. Because once you're in, you're in. Now, there are notable exceptions. There was a famous account of a Muslim who was forgiven for recanting under torture. And Muhammad himself was merciful in this instance. But 99.9999% of cases are not like that. They don't merit an exception. And this is one of those things that does not merit an exception. Jesus famously talked about the man who built his house on the rock. The idea that a strong foundation will create a faith that can weather trials and difficulty, like Job. And this was contrasted with the foolish man who built his house on the sand without a strong foundation. And the house just collapses at the first hint of trouble, as you would think it would. Now, the parallel here is kind of obvious. You could say that the house built on the sand was like the Bedouin, and I suppose it was. But I don't think that even captures this pathetic display of wavering faith. This isn't just someone who built his house on the sand. This guy built his house in the mud in the middle of a river. And unsurprisingly, it fell down pretty quickly. But that's no excuse, Muhammad is saying. Whatever the house is built on, it has been built. And you're stuck with it for life. Thank you, and I'll talk to you next time. Inshallah.